not in the traditional studio. But joining me tonight, all the way from somewhere, is Gutsick Gibbon, also known as Erica, who is a great YouTube content creator who likes to talk about my favorite scientific subject, anthropology, as well as zoology and a bunch of other cool stuff. So Erica, welcome to Truth Wanted.
Hey, thank you for having me on. Yeah, you pretty much summed it up. That's me. I'm currently a master student in primatology, so I dig the ant stuff, and I dig all of the amazing extant apes and monkeys that go along with it. So, we're better to express that than YouTube.
Absolutely. Like in another life, I would have become an anthropologist myself. When I switched schools and I had to redo my credits, I just took anthropology again because I just really liked it. I did it was a biological anthropology course first time. Second time was a general course. It wasn't exactly the same, but I still had to do it. And I loved it. I love it. It's my favorite kind of science. And it's also a science that a lot of people aren't super familiar with. So there may be people wondering, what is anthropology? Like, what do you do as someone who studies anthropology?
Oh man. Well, see, being someone who's studying primatology, I'm sort of in that vein that crosses in between biology and anthropology. But anthropology in particular, it's the study of us. It's the study of humans, and whether it's cultural and studying what we're doing now and perhaps why we're doing it, sometimes it can delve into the deep past, into biological anthropology, or what did we evolve from, and what were the pressures that led to that. So we get to as anthropologists, as people interested in anthropology, explore some of the unique aspects of what makes us human, because while there are a great many, in fact, I would even say the majority of characteristics that we have that we share with the other great apes and the mammals and pretty much every other organism on this planet to a degree, there are a handful of things that make us novel. And that's what we get to explore whenever we delve into the world of anthropology.
Now, this is what's really, really great about your story in particular, because you used to be a young Earth creationist, right? Which is like the exact opposite of what an anthropologist is. Like, I know there's young Earth creationists who do study like biology and who do study particular sciences and stuff. Like, I know that's a thing, but anthropologists, that's like the most atheist of the sciences outside of like physics, maybe. I don't know. Like I've seen some stuff that kind of suggests that. Like, am I correct in saying that?
Well, let's put it this way, Dan. There's a reason why you don't find any anthropologists on staff at Answers in Genesis,
right,
or at like ICR. I mean, they can scrounge themselves up a geneticist here and there, maybe a biologist. Man, they even got themselves a geologist. A couple of them do. But yep, you won't find an anthropologist kind of in those dregs, and the reason is because the evidence, when you're exposed to it, when it's all laid out in front of you in sort of a like a linear fashion, it just blows your mind how robust it is. I guess that's the only way of putting it, is that it really is just so robust. And human evolution was really what kind of swayed me on young Earth creationism, that and all of the geology for like the age of the Earth and things of this nature.
Yeah, it's what's really fascinating about the field of anthropology to me is just how wide it really is and how much you can kind of fit into that field. Like, if I had to go against a debate, if I had to debate any kind of religious apologist in the world, and I could only arm myself with one kind of science, I feel like anthropology is the strongest out of all of that, because this claims made by anthropologists really directly refute a lot of claims that religions have made for centuries, as far as like the origins of people, kind of, the age of the Earth is kind of is included in that. How we interact with each other, where we kind of came from, all of that is kind of somewhat answered through anthropology. There's a lot of questions we don't know, as anybody who studies the field knows, and it develops stuff every single year. I mean, I read stuff in the news that I was taught differently from when I was in college just a couple of years ago, just because there's so many new findings about how old humanity is, as far as like Homo sapiens, where our other lineages come from and stuff. It really is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, no, you're dead right. I mean, when we think of anthropology, it's very easy to picture kind of like Indiana Jones out there, like with his little duster and just kind of like, messing around with bones. But man, you've got bioanth, which is like the history of human evolution, cultural anthropology, which studies us today, forensic anthropology, which cops use all the time to try to figure out who done it, and archaeological anthropology, which is kind of like your ancient cultures. It's like smack dab in between cultural today and bioanth, kind of bridging that gap. So yeah, I mean that I think you really hit the nail on the head by saying like if you really could arm yourself with any field going in and chatting with creationists or strict apologists of any kind, anthropology is going to be what you want to at least have in your arsenal, even if you're not leading with it, because it really does complicate things as far as if we're taking any aspect of sort of the biblical text literally. I think allegorical interpretations can mesh decently, but there are still several kind of hoops that you almost have to jump through. What was the first human? Do you start with Afarensis, Lucy, or
Right.
do you start with Habilis, or what?
Oh
When
my God.
does consciousness come into play, as far as they like to describe it?
Oh, Erica, I say these exact same things. Like I like verbatim. I'm like, are we talking about Australopithecus afarensis? Are we talking about Homo habilis? Like, what do we mean? And like 90% of the time, if I ever talk about like those examples specifically, the other person's like, what? Like they
Yeah.
don't, it's just not taught. It's just not even a thing. Like if I had to change one of our public school curriculum core courses, I would put anthropology in there because I think it's like, even in the atheist community, it's not a topic I feel like that comes up enough when it comes to just the stuff that we know about our lineage and the lineage of other hominids. I mean, like if you have a full of understanding of anthropology as I mean, even I do, let alone you, then just the understanding of how we came about and how we could navigate our world is going to completely be different from maybe a young earth creationist worldview, or even like a religious worldview in general, especially if you're looking at things from a cultural anthropological perspective, when looking at the study of the origins of some of these religious ideas and how they kind of cross cultures.
Yes, absolutely. And it's fascinating too, because we tend to think of this idea of like an emergent consciousness and in this ascent of man, the hero's journey from this meso predator ambling around trying to avoid getting eaten in the savannah to what we are today. And we put ourselves even kind of in a naturalist standpoint, sometimes we can put ourselves on a bit of a pedestal. But when you take a step back and you look at just how much depth there is to the other hominoids, like your great apes, your chimps, your bonobos, your gorillas, or even like your baboons and macaques, you suddenly realize that consciousness isn't an on or off switch. It's just this massive gradient.
Yes, and the consciousness question is really interesting because I'll talk to people about like souls, for example, and it was just like, okay, do Neanderthals have souls? Do these other hominid species, do they have souls? Because one of the assignments I had in college was I had to go to the local zoo and study for 30 minutes. I think it was like 4 different species, and record my observations for every single minute. And the experience I got out of that was these creatures that we're looking at and that we put in cages, a lot of them really aren't that different from us in just so many different ways, especially when we're talking about great apes, right? Not necessarily the new world kind of primates, but like the great apes, especially when you look at them in their social habitats and you see them interacting with each other, and you see they're just kind of funny looking people almost.
Yeah. I always think of it from a perspective of like, if you were to go out in the woods and just stop grooming yourself completely, I mean, it would become much more evident than it currently is now, even morphologically how similar we are.
Yeah.
Let alone behaviorally. I mean, golly, some of the language experiments have been incredible. They've done some excellent work on like, which of the primates have a theory of mind? Like, can they empathize?
Yeah.
And the answers are always very surprising. I feel like we generally don't give them enough credit.
Well, there's so many myths out there. There's so many common misconceptions. Like I didn't realize, of course, until I studied this stuff that I had an assignment. Again, I was looking at cranial capacities of different hominid species. So we literally just got these plasters of these skulls, and we were looking at it, and measuring them around. And it turns out, like Neanderthals, for example, have a larger cranial capacity than we do. So we always, like, there's this assumption that, oh, humans are smart because we have the biggest brains. But like these other hominids had bigger brains than we did. So like obviously size isn't all that matters, at least when it comes to brains. But
yeah, that's kind of the interesting thing. You'd be surprised how many people, I mean, I guess you wouldn't be surprised, unfortunately, but how many people don't know just how much prowess Neanderthals had with at least their brain case size. But the interesting thing about that is that while it is bigger, it's bigger in a different way. So their occipital lobe, that's that big hunk of brain that's right in the back of your skull. That was what made up a huge portion of the ground that they had on sort of archaic humans at the time, which means that they would have kicked our butts in pretty much any Olympic sport. I mean, their hand-eye coordination would have been impeccable, but they weren't, at least this is the thinking based on endocasts, they weren't probably quite as good at critical thinking as we were, which is kind of why like we're the ones who were like, hey, like what if we kind of exploit this relationship that we have with these sort of dogs and wolf dogs that are hanging around our camps, and we can hunt better with them. Pat Shipman was I think she's Pennsylvania adjunct professor, but she wrote this fascinating book that suggests that maybe the domestication of dogs from wolves like helped us outcompete the Neanderthals. But because you're right, I mean, but for all intents and purposes, you sure would think that they would have a leg up on us, at least in some ways.
You would think, and yet they're the ones that are currently extinct. Here, and that's a really big mystery in anthropology right now. There's a lot of ideas, one of the most prominent ones being that humans were actually the ones that ended up killing them off, which is a strange thing to think about. But like, how different would our world be in our ideas about religion, our ideas about our origins of people, if Neanderthals and humans like walked alongside each other today? I think that'd be really fascinating. But
I think so too.
It's just not the current thing. We're the dominant species, and we just kind of went all over the place and had to refigure out, oh, these are all of our cousins and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Which is just really fascinating. But I'm really glad you get to talk to me about this, because this is, again, just a subject I'm really, really passionate about. But